We have been told that Trump had a master plan: trigger tariffs, crash the stock market, slow the economy, and force the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates. This would allow the government to finance itself more cheaply and alleviate the public debt problem. The problem? Well, that master plan never existed. Yes, you've probably seen many analysts defending it, developing elaborate theories to try to explain why the actions of the Republican government ultimately made sense. The reality? Honestly, I think those theories were nothing more than patches and fixes that, in many cases, Trumpist propaganda aired on the fly in order to flee forward. And yesterday, finally, the House of Cards came crashing down. Trump has been forced to back down, has paused the tariffs 90 days, reducing them to 10% for all countries except China. Neither master strategy nor fifth dimensional chess. After unleashing a massive financial tsunami and brutal wealth destruction, Trump has picked up some of the slack he released. He has done so not only because of the economic chaos he was unleashing, but because even within his own Republican Party, an uprising was brewing against the leader himself.
7 GOP senators sign on to bill to check Trump's trade authority.
But do you know what? It doesn't matter whether Trump had a devious master plan or not, because the truth is that even if he had, it would have failed. Interest rates, contrary to what this supposed plan preached, not only did not go down, but instead skyrocketed. And as you can imagine, that came with a multi-million-dollar bill. This is something that any sensible economist could foresee. We ourselves here on Visualeconomik have warned about it in several previous videos. If you start a big trade war against the world, if you antagonize everyone, if you make extreme decisions from one day to the next, in the end, you become something like a banana republic, and you lose the trust that has always characterized the US. And if you lose confidence, then you have fewer investors willing to lend you their money, and therefore, your cost of debt skyrockets. But of course, this is not a story about sensible economists. This is a story of characters like Peter Navarro, one of the president's top advisors, a guru more typical of a conspiracy novel written at 3 in the morning than a White House advisor. Yes, we're talking about the same Peter Navarro who a few days ago Elon Musk said was dumber than a sack of bricks. Visualeconomik community, in today's video we'll see what's behind this whole story, Trump's actions, the president's true intentions, the characters and ideas behind them. Why did Trump shoot off tariffs left and right? Why has he now backtracked? Where are we? And what can we expect in the future? Well, that's what we're going to take a look at right now. To understand this story, let's take a chronological look at the facts. On April 2nd, Liberation Day, Trump announces tariffs left and right. He argues that they are reciprocal tariffs, that is, a response to trade barriers that other countries would be putting up against the US at their discretion. The president explains that foreign powers do not buy enough US products, mainly because of the boycott on exchange rates, and that these response tariffs are therefore the tool to correct all these manipulations. However, this argument was soon dismantled. On the one hand, we have the surreal case of the Heard and McDonald Islands, a territory inhabited only by seals and penguins that Trump included in his list of reciprocal tariffs. Then there is the case of Ecuador, a dollarized country, and therefore one that cannot cheat with the exchange rate. We also have the case of Madagascar, one of the poorest countries in the world, with no bargaining power or ability to manipulate whatsoever. Its citizens survive on a few dollars a day. Their main trade is the export of vanilla, and they are so miserable that they cannot afford to buy anything from the US. Well, Trump slapped a 47% tariff on that country. Or if you want a funnier case, there's Japan. The president accuses the Japanese of manipulating the market in order not to buy a single American car, even though they have no tariffs. The problem is that the president and his troop had one small oversight. The Japanese actually drive on the left, and US factories do not manufacture cars adapted to drive in the other lane because it isn't profitable for them. The result? Japan simply cannot import any American cars. In the end, it was all excuses. And of course, the doubts were completely cleared up with the famous manipulated equation, where it was shown that the White House invented the figures of alleged trade manipulation of other countries in order to justify its tariffs in any way it could. Trump never intended tariffs as a defense. They were a gratuitous attack on the rest of the world.
The
The next day, stock markets open, and one of the biggest crashes in recent history occurs. Along with the 2008 crisis and the year of COVID, in the short term, interest rates fall, and in the panic, Trumpism gives strength to a new narrative. This is Scott Bessent, the US Secretary of the Treasury. On the 4th, he gave an interview to Tucker Carlson. Yes, the same Tucker Carlson who interviewed, or rather publicly massaged, Vladimir Putin. The point is that in this interview, the argument was already very different. Suddenly, the tariffs were not only a response to the rest of the world, but a policy of economic reindustrialization, a measure to, theoretically, strengthen the US economy.
Why do they care about the tariff? Because they're going to eat them. I think that this is the beginning of a process. We're going to reindustrialize.
In this same interview, a parallel line of argument also emerged, that of the alleged master plan.
We're going to take in substantial tariff revenue. The 10-year bond, which had almost peaked at 5%, is now through 4%. A way to think about it is, every 100 basis points is about $1 trillion in savings, so we've saved $100 billion.
The tariffs could raise money while reducing the cost of debt, and in fact, for a couple of days, the public debt caps went down. According to Bessent, the plan would have saved $100 billion. Trump supporters then saw in these statements the perfect excuse to justify the tariff boom. It was all the result of the famous five-dimensional chess. The problem? Well, there were several problems with all this. On the one hand, as we mentioned at the beginning, rates soon rose again and were substantially higher than before the tariff wave. But then again, even if rates had remained low, that $100 billion was a pittance. I mean, just 24 hours after Liberation Day, just one company like Apple had already lost over $200 billion in stock market value. The S&P 500 lost $2.4 trillion in a single day. Obviously, this means less income from capital income, the paralysis of many investments, less income if a recession occurs, less consumption due to a fall in the wealth effect, and so we could go on with a long list of negative implications. Was Trump's plan really to destroy the stock market, the economy, the dollar, and international confidence in the country, with the losses involved to save just $100 billion in interest payments when, on top of that, the projected deficit is approaching $2 trillion? Either it was a very, very, very bad plan, or the plan simply did not exist. And yes, Trump may be ill-advised, but not so ill-advised that he couldn't do a bit of such simple maths. The next few days, things went from bad to worse. The stock market continued to plummet, as to be expected, but unfortunately for die-hard Trumpists, interest rates began to skyrocket, making the supposed rate plan meaningless. Things were going badly. Many people sympathetic to MAGA started to criticize what was going on. Even Elon Musk posted several tweets defending free trade against tariffs. So, faced with this scenario, where it became so obvious that tariffs were bad, the Trumpist propaganda had to find a new excuse. And that is how another new secret plan emerged. Another bizarre chess theory in 200 dimensions to justify everything that was going on. The theory of free trade. This new theory said that, in reality, Trump is a liberal through and through, that the only reason he imposed tariffs was to reach agreements with the other powers to remove them. A kind of dare that would give the other regions a choice between total free trade or total enmity. And guess what? This strategy seemed tremendously successful. It really worked. For example, the European Union, Vietnam, and apparently many other nations soon offered zero tariff agreements to the United States. The problem? Well, this theory was not true either. Again, it was just a justification pulled out of thin air, and Trump himself rejected those free market offers. And not only that, he also made a mockery of all the countries that were contacting the US government to negotiate.
Donald Trump rejects Europe's offer to drop tariffs. They are screwing us. They are kissing my ass. Trump says countries are pleading to negotiate tariffs.
I'm telling you, these countries are calling us up, kissing my ass. They are dying to make a deal. Please, sir, make a deal. I'll do anything. I'll do anything, sir.
Not to mention that there still remains a 10% tariff for the rest of the world, 25% for automobiles, and over 100% for China. Visualeconomik community, theory after theory, master plan after master plan, all these pieces were falling like dominoes. It was nothing more than trying to justify the unjustifiable. And in reality, Trump's real plan was much more basic and obvious than all that, and the key lies in one crucial character in the shadows, Peter Navarro. Peter Navarro is not only one of the biggest influences on Trump's economic ideology, he is also one of the key players in his administration. But who is Peter Navarro, and how did he get to the top of the executive group? Well, this story is so bizarre that it seems made up, but it isn't. It all started when Donald Trump asked his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, to find him an economic advisor. But not just anyone. He wanted someone who would make him look tough and talk even tougher about China. So Jared, without thinking too hard, opened Amazon, searched for books by economists, and came across this one here, Death by China, Confronting the Dragon, a global call to action, and thought, hey, this title's pretty cool. Without hesitation, he called the author directly, the very same Peter Navarro, and he offered him the job. But surprise, surprise, Navarro did not have an outstanding reputation in the economic world. As I said earlier, it was a profile more typical of a 3 a.m. talk show on an occult channel. What he did have was an unhealthy obsession with tariffs, and on top of that, he tended to lean heavily on the analysis of an expert collaborator who he recurrently cited in his books as a source of authority, Ron Vara. But this is where the weird stuff starts. Who exactly is this supposed expert Ron Vara? Nobody. Literally nobody. He's a fake expert invented by Navarro himself. Ron Vara is an anagram of his own name, the letters of Navarro put in a different order. This is how the latest US trade policy was designed during the Trump era. A fictitious expert, a flashy cover story, and an Amazon search. It was more than enough to make it to the White House control booth. Result, $11 trillion evaporated in days, markets in freefall, and the world flirting with another Great Depression. But one thing is clear, the defense of tariffs. Trump did not seek an advisor to advise him. He sought an advisor to confirm his own beliefs. We've known the reason for Trump's tariffs for a long time, and he and his entourage keep repeating it over and over again. They think tariffs are good for the US. Trump has always been an advocate of tariffs, and has been for at least 10 years. In his first term, he couldn't take them that far because he had counterweights. But now, with the Senate, Congress, and Republican Party under control, he has more leeway. During recent days, the president has been actively and passively calling for calm, trying to convince all his followers that tariffs will be good in the long run, that they are the way to revive American industry, that, in short, they are the crucial to make America great again. And he's not the only one to say this. Peter Navarro has literally said that this is not a negotiation, that the tariff remain to fix a system that is broken. Howard Lutnick, Secretary of Commerce, has said that, for example, the army of millions and millions of human beings screwing tiny screws to make iPhones is coming to the United States, referring to the fact that the tariffs will bring more jobs to the US. Anyone can see the obvious, and that is that turning the United States into a country of screwdriver drivers, toy machinists, and sock knitters may not be the wonderful idea they think it is. Well, the point is that they think it, and they defend it. And remember, in the election campaign, they said so in every possible way. Now, have the Republican cabinet really been so incompetent as to throw themselves into the void in this way? Well, partly yes, but partly no. This whole story has yet another twist in it, and for that I have to introduce you to today's latest protagonist, Stephen Miran. Stephen Miran is another of the president's key advisors. This time we're talking about a more serious profile, the director of the White House Council of Economic Advisors himself. Well, a few months ago, at the end of 2024, Miran published a very enlightening report. In that report, Miran proposed a tenfold increase in tariffs, not as a temporary measure, not as a lobbying or negotiating tool, but as a permanent policy. Here, the key is that Miran argued that the US has so much buyer power that it can force other countries to absorb that cost of tariffs without affecting American pockets. That's because the US has so much buying power, companies in other countries would lower their prices after the tariffs so as not to lose their US customers. But it doesn't end there. Miran also suggested using US military power as a kind of trade weapon. That is, if any allied country dared to respond with economic retaliation, the US could exclude it. A blackmail. Either you accept my trade rules, or find yourself another missile shield. And the curious thing is that Miran was not alone in this. He supported his ideas with studies by renowned economists from universities such as MIT and Berkeley, who estimated that tariffs of 20% could even be profitable for the US. Ultimately, Miran's calculations indicated that a large tariff hike could end up benefiting the US. But of course, as is often the case, theory is one thing and reality is another. Theoretical models hold everything and often leave out more abstract and important things like confidence in the country, the financial system, or long-term alliances. And this is something we have seen very clearly with the fall of the dollar. In short, it is possible that Trump relied on the estimates of Miran, who, let's remember, is his chief economic advisor, an experiment with global trade that, now, after proving to be unsuccessful, has forced the executive to backtrack. This theory is not only more plausible than all the others, but it has been on the cards for several months, and fits with all the ideas Trump has always shown to have. In conclusion, and as a final reflection of this video, we'd like to make one thing clear. Sometimes the simplest explanations are the best way to go. Raising bizarre and mysterious theories will not make your analysis better. And as always happens in life, when something fails, looking for excuses is always easier than accepting reality. And it will continue to happen. After Trump backtracked, new bizarre theories have already come out again, such as one that says it was all a strategy to show who truly was an ally of the US and who was not. In short, when you need increasingly convoluted theories to understand a political event, perhaps the problem is not that you aren't understanding it, but that there is nothing to understand. But at this point, it's your turn. Do you think the tariffs will ultimately go ahead in 90 days? What course of action would you choose to help boost trade and reduce the deficit in the US? You can leave me your answers in the comments. And as always, don't forget that here on Visualeconomik, we release new videos every week, so subscribe to this channel and hit the little bell so you don't miss any of our updates. If you like this video, like it, and I'll see you in the next one. All the best. See you next time.